All right, so why don't we just kind of, who wants to kind of talk a little bit about what the clinical scenario is and what we are supposed to kind of be doing for our clinical project?
All right, so let's just start, I guess, by going a little bit over the scenario, not like reading word for word, but then
Right.
we're just kind of going down it.
No worries.
So it looks like we have a clinic that was open 10 years prior by a nurse practitioner who was really running it only part-time. She was also a professor at a local university. It looks like over the 10 years, the clinic grew and really no solid leadership was established there. It looks like at one point she had to invest her own money. She put in $100,000. Looks like in 2015, they wrote a proposal to become federally funded as a community health center, but it doesn't say that that ever went through. It looks like they had a collaborating physician. Once the state gave full practice authority to nurse practitioners, they no longer needed the physician, which probably saved money. But then that was also perhaps like one less provider they're seeing patients. I'm not sure if the physician ever saw patients. They had a business manager, and it doesn't seem like that was very great communication between Dr. Brown, who is the clinical director, and the business manager. And it looks like all things were going well until suddenly there's no money. And things are not going so well. They were, looks like they only had contracts with Medicaid and one other insurance. Probably would have been a good idea to get on board with Medicare as well. Medicare patients is a huge population. There were some other part-time nurse practitioners working there. And if you look through day by day how many patients they're seeing, I mean, they're seeing a fair amount of patients. 25 patients Monday, 20 patients Tuesday. Looks like at one point the RN feels overworked, the medical assistants feel overworked, nurse practitioners feel overworked, yet there's definitely no money at this point to hire on new staff.
Yeah, they can barely pay rent and utilities.
Right. And then there's a question about whether they can even cover payroll. So morale, obviously at this point, started going downhill. The business manager, I'm just not thrilled with basically the way they describe them all throughout the whole scenario.
Seems like she's really focused on thinking that hiring a physician is going to solve all their financial problems, but I think it goes into a lot deeper levels than that. I think other solutions are going to be needed than just that, if that at all.
Definitely. And it looks like when they brought in a financial consultant, they found out that really billing has not even been taking place properly. So they haven't, I'm sure, been getting the reimbursement that they even could have.
That happened for 3 years. Isn't that horrible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of started analyzing the situation by just answering the first question, describing the past and current organization structure. I use the document that they provided for us by Williams. I said the past organization structure was kind of a horizontal, flat structure. This is common for startup businesses, and that's what Dr. Brown did. She started her own practice. And it also demonstrates that there's not a lot of layers of leadership. So in the beginning, it was just Dr. Brown and her patients. She expanded it a little bit more to her, some other NPs, and then the physician. And then I said, as the business grew more and they employed more staff, it maybe became more of like a functional structure. And that is kind of just, let's see. It kind of represents more of the traditional chain of command, where it kind of operates from authority down low. So you had like Dr. Brown, who was the clinical leader, and then the business manager. It seemed like they had a RN who was a supervisor of the lab, and then kind of the lower level staff of MAs and the receptionist.
So does that appear like a good leadership model, that they were, I guess she started one way and then when they expanded, they kind of try to keep it the same, which has to evolve, right? Now that there's more people, like who's going to be in charge, who reports to who, because I think that's where the confusion was. Like, you know, the business manager kind of took on a lot of responsibility, and that's where everybody kind of just did not agree with that. So,
Yeah, I think
not a true leader per se.
I think, sorry, the business manager and Dr. Brown conflicted a lot with that leadership role, which created a lot of conflict. I think it would have been better if there was one clear, direct leader, and then everybody else kind of at a lower level. Seems like the business manager kind of tried to get the other staff members to take her side instead of really have a discussion about the issues and possible solutions.
Right. They don't really talk about like having a structure, meaning, well, do they have policies? You know, what is it? Who do they report to? So there was really no structure. So I think it's completely broken. I think we need to kind of just read more about what structure we think it would work within the clinic with the amount of employees that they have, and what budget should they have in order for them to be able to maintain it open.
Yeah, it looks like they just don't have policies and procedures clearly written out, like you said. I doubt that they have like any standardized work. I mean, it says that the business manager is asking the nurse practitioners to do the blood draws, filing, and even cleaning the bathroom. So clearly they don't have their role delineated like they should, because I don't think that nurse practitioners with the salaries that they must be getting should be cleaning the bathrooms necessarily.
Especially if they're not seeing enough patients and they, you know,
right.
No income. If you don't see patients and you're cleaning bathrooms, it's not going to work. Okay. So obviously we agree that there's no clear goals or responsibilities. The chain of command is broken. So we have to kind of just look at what will work for that first part, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
I was almost wondering if maybe in this situation, if like an organizational structure where the clinical director, like Dr. Brown, and then maybe like an administrator / business manager could kind of be at the top of it, because I think they both have their strengths. One would be clinical, one could be like the financial business side of it. Maybe not this particular lady. I assume she's probably going to get fired, but I just wonder, I mean, not that there's like two people in charge, but kind of almost like a team approach where they work off of each other's strengths.
If they were going to do something like that, I mean, they need to set aside time at least each week to meet with each other, keep each other on the same page, and actually function as a team rather than, I mean, it doesn't sound like that's been happening at all. It sounds like it was just kind of assumed that the business manager was taking care of things and has not been.
Right.
Right. So I know from my previous experience, whenever it comes to billing, there has to be like a triple check. Well, we used to call it triple check, which everybody kind of checked. This is what we're billing. This is the codes that we used before you even submit anything. So nobody was really checking on her that she was submitting monthly or quarterly, whatever it was, depending on the insurance. I know Medicaid is pretty specific about that. They're not working with Medicare, so it's a complete different billing process. But so again, we talk about nobody's really overseeing anybody. It's a free for all, really. I mean, it looks like, you know, the business manager she was going to get credentialing for the providers, making sure all the paperwork was there. But because there's no job description and who's responsible for who, for what, I think that's where it kind of fell apart. Like today I'm billing, tomorrow I don't, so nobody's checking on me, so I'm not going to do it.
I mean, and it could be that this business manager does not really have a background in billing and just not necessarily is slacking on the job, but just really doesn't know how to bill correctly.
Or
So
understand.
I think either hiring a biller that has a strong history in that, or hiring maybe an outside billing company to handle things.
Yeah,
I
so
know I'm working with one of my residency sites. It's two DNP sisters who went into business together for primary care, and they hired a credentialer and biller who handled the credentialing to make sure all of the paperwork was necessary so that they could get contracts with Medicaid, Medicare, and all of the other private insurances, and then does the billing and making sure that the charting matches the visit, matches the billing, everything. So, you know, and then it is a little bit, you know, on the pricey side sometimes getting a good biller and credentialer, but you know, if you're getting that money back, you know,
worth it.
it's worth it for sure.
Yeah, I think that billing is not just something you can kind of like wing it and figure it out as you go. Like you need somebody who knows what they're doing to start with.
Yeah, and if it's wrong, you have to pay money back. So I don't think anybody wants to go through that.
And I think definitely maybe working on becoming contracted with more types of insurance as well as Medicare, so that more types of patients will come to the clinic.
And I think it said that a lot, half of the patient population was 65 and older, like 18 to 65, and then 65 and older was like a big portion of their
Yeah,
patient population.
Yeah, and they did talk about the fee for service, or they were like patients that were not paying for the service. So obviously that's money lost there.
Or a sliding scale too, which is obviously going to offer a lower financial income if, you know, people don't have insurance or not a great insurance. The fee for them is going to be a lot lower compared to a patient with private insurance.
Yeah, I mean, it's really great that they wanted to open a clinic for like low income or underinsured people, but you need a mix of patients, or else you need like strong federal funding for your clinic that is going to support the lack of payment from patients.
Right, and I think that's another business structure, like the case mix. You know, how many patients are you going to see that are Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance in order for you to meet your budget? That's not there either. They don't talk about how many Medicaid patients they see a month, or how many private insurance, or how many private pay. So that's something else that they had to kind of incorporate there to know exactly how much they're going to be getting monthly or every time.
That might be a good place. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that might be a good place for them to start, is to kind of do some kind of data tracking to, like I said, see how many patients they're seeing with Medicaid, private insurance, and then see, you know, what other insurance they can bring in or do contracts with.
Right.
I was just wondering, you guys, if like, let's say we had the clinic apply for like federally funded community health center, like they had mentioned, if we have that set up, can you still take patients with private insurance? I assume you do, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think you can. I think I know a little bit about it. I think you can take, I think they're more for like fee for service, like, or the sliding scale pay, for example. Like if it's you know, they get that grant and say, well, you're going to see this patient, but they only make a certain amount a month. you should be charging them only this much.
Okay.
Yeah, and then like depending on the federal funding that you get for Medicaid patients, the reimbursement goes up significantly for those visits.
Depending on the service, right? Or what they do, the treatment.
Mhm.
Okay. So that kind of goes to, what is it, part 2, business model and finances. So we kind of talked about everything.
Right. Still under part 1, it says to utilize the 4 frames outlined by Bowman and Deal. I know that we did talk about who the leaders of the organizations are and that there's really not any clear goals or responsibilities at this point in time.
Right. And for
But
that model is kind of, you have to define clear goals, assign specific roles obviously for each member, and specific activities with specific policies, procedures, and chain of command, which that's not there. According to that model. Frame, sorry. So we kind of talked a little bit about the part 2, that investigate the clinic's reimbursement, which we really don't know, right? Other than they have only contracts with Medicaid and one private insurance. We don't know what the payer mix is, or how many patients they see of each. I don't think they have the amount of patients that they see, but it doesn't specify what their payer source is. Do you know what I'm talking about on the, what is it, the 3rd page? They do have the reasons, or how many patients for what reason do they see? Mostly chronic illness, physicals.
They do women's health too, I think.
Yeah.
yeah, it mentions that there's a high teenage pregnancy rate, early sexual activity, and a large number of smokers in the practice.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to know what the reimbursement is for each of that population set that they see. I don't know if they pay, obviously they pay a different amount depending on what the service that they are providing. So that's something that we have to look into.
Also, when I think about value-based payment models, I just automatically associate that with Medicare, because I think of like blood pressure goals or lipid goals. I'll have to look more into that, but I would lean more towards the fee for service versus a value-based payment model, but I'll look more into that to see.
So the value based, that's like the newer models that they came up with, right? The ACOs, like say you have a heart attack, you get a lump of money, like 25,000 for, depending on the patient's stay. Whether the patient recovers or not, the patient, you get that amount of money. So if things go downhill, so there's just where we go, quality of health, right? You got to make sure if you provide quality health, the patient should be able to stay out of the hospital. If they come back to the hospital, they're not going to give you an extra $25,000. That's just the amount of money you get for that heart surgery you did. So it kind of like, sometimes good if you know you're providing good care and that patient's going to stay out, then it's worth it. But if you know the patient's extremely sick, I think where I worked before, they try to implement that, and I know Renown has that with all the other outpatient clinics, like skilled nursing facilities and stuff, just kind of to see if it worked. I haven't been involved on that, but it was kind of interesting because we were admit a patient that, yes, they had heart surgery, but they never count like all the comorbidities they had.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, if they go back to the hospital for a different reason, it's going to be, so it wasn't, it's pretty interesting. Same thing with the bundle payment. So when it's fee for service, it's like, provide you this service, I'm doing labs for you today, this is how much you're going to pay for that, $25. And that's all you're going to pay.
Mm-hmm.
So it all depends, what kind of patient population they're serving and what kind of needs they have.
I think a lot of the value-based payment in primary care is for preventative care. So if they are doing certain things for certain patients, say with COPD or CAD, you know, again, I'd have to look more into it too, but I know that there's like there's a lean towards that.
I almost feel like with value-based care, that would be something that they could strive to work towards, but maybe not initially start with that.
Right.
But
Yeah, it doesn't clearly identify like what model they're using now, but I am kind of assuming that it's the fee for service one. Since they talk about, you know, billing patients for like services, specific services and things like that.
I guess we'll also have to figure out like if this clinic will take people who, let's say, are paying cash on their own. Do they have to have like all the money up front, or, you know, that's just like a minor detail and that we'll figure out at some point. But gosh, there's just a lot with payment.
Yeah,
There is a lot.
I think if they're using a sliding scale, I mean, most places now do require payment at the time of service. Otherwise, if a big portion of that money you're really never going to see.
Mhm.
And just remember on the bottom of the page, it says analyze what we give you and consider what you can change. So even though they give us this scenario, we can just, I think they're just expecting us to write and kind of have a knowledge of what each part of this is and what connection does it have with the business, running a business or a practice. So when it comes to discuss components of independent practice, we kind of just talk about it. I mean, it's not just open a business and that's it, right?
Right. No, I mean, but I mean, healthcare to some extent is like any other business. I mean, you need to advertise yourself, you need to bring in customers, which are patients, you know, so it's all of that. It's not just seeing patients, treating them, sending them on their way, and like that's it. It's not like
Right.
working for a larger clinic or a larger organization.
But even before, say, before you set up to open the clinic, you have to make sure you have the proper EMR. What are you going to use as far as that? So kind of like the background work of how are you going to keep track of the patients? So there's more the schedules.
I didn't even see in here, does it talk about like what kind of like EHR they have, or do they have one?
No, it doesn't say anything about that, which is interesting. It kind of just gives you a broad picture of this is what's happening and this is what the problem is. To me, it kind of like seems like they focus more on the money part, like they can't make it, they're just gonna close, or, you know, but not specifically give us like the background. How are they tracking the appointments? How long are the appointments? I mean, if they see 20 patients a day, you know, how long can a visit really happen to see 20 patients a day in 8 hours or 12 hours? Maybe 20 minutes the most.
Mm-hmm.
So the scheduling. We talked about the billing software, the medical equipment. What are they using? Is it reliable? And then the staff workflow kind of goes back to the scheduling. You know, how often do they work? How long are their appointments? You did talk, somebody talked about the marketing strategies as well. Was that?
I mean, yeah, marketing strategies, you have to market your business like any other type of business. So I think, I mean, a lot of different private practice clinics have like billboards or things like that, or advertisement, maybe in newspapers or
Even a website.
Website.
Even word of mouth, just, you know, providing good patient care. Those patients might recommend them, you know, other people to the clinic.
community events as well.
Mhm.
And it kind of just asks, you know, how do you feel about having a full-time provider, since it's like that's the solution that the business manager had, right? If you have a physician in the clinic, that will fix the problem.
Well, I mean, I think their rationale is that if you have a physician on board, reimbursement is going to be higher, but that's not the case if the billing's not being done correctly. And the physician is going to cost you so much more money.
To stay
Like,
on-
I don't think a physician is like going to fix everything for sure.
No, I think if we don't have a baseline exactly of, okay, once the full billing is completed accurately and everything, and you know what your income is, we have no idea, right? If we really need a physician and you're going to pay $10,000 to this person, or however much they charge, I mean, you have to know where you are starting first. So I don't believe so. And I kind of read a little bit about it. I think Medicaid gives, in most states, it gives the 100% for NPs. I might be wrong, but I think I read about that. So it all depends the insurance. I know Medicare is the one here, and it's more specific of, you know, how much they reimburse, depending on the service that you provide. But I could always just look more into that and see if that's actually something that.
I did read a little bit about that. And I think where the business manager is getting her idea that the physician would help is because they do receive 100% reimbursement, but for Medicare, they usually only reimburse 85% for APRNs. There is kind of a way around it. So if like the APRN provides a service with the physician present, they can do what's called an incident to billing method. And if they do that, then the APRN can be reimbursed 100%, but the physician has to be there. And then I read for Medicaid that it just depends on the state that you live in, which I don't think it says what state they live in, unless somebody came across that. But Medicaid can reimburse 85 to 100%. But if they're in one of those states where they only reimburse 85%, which could be since she's pushing the physician, employing a physician so much, that might be where they're losing some income too.
Okay. So I think, what do you guys think about us like doing our focus when we're doing our research to do it on Nevada? Is everybody for Nevada, or am I just, I know not everybody is.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I think that would make the most sense. And I mean, Nevada kind of goes along with this, like the state that this scenario takes place in has given APRNs full scope, which Nevada has pretty much as well. And so, I mean, I think that just makes the most sense.
Also, with us all being in the DNP program, I kind of feel like we should reject the MD idea and just cross that off. We don't need them.
I don't think we should look to a doctor to fix all our problems.
No.
Even if you say like that, you know, reimbursement, you can get 100% if they're there in the clinic. I mean, I don't think they sign up for this and they're going to want to go and review every single chart that you can. I mean, 20 patients, can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little too much. I don't think it will be feasible, but again.
And so would that additional 15% pay for that physician's salary? Probably not.
Cancel out.
I feel like I've seen that happen quite a bit at Renown, like with hospitalist rounding. I'll see like an NP write the whole note on an inpatient and then just a little blurb from a physician, you know, and then they'll get the 100%, but it's just different when somebody's inpatient. You're not like on a 15-minute time crunch,
Right.
you know, versus like an outpatient visit.
I mean, you really have to trust your NP. If you're a physician and you go and they probably just read the note and do a 5-minute visit. Who knows? Kind of crazy. All right.
Yeah. The physician just writes a little blurb saying they laid eyes on the patient or something like that. And then the NP writes the whole thing.
The whole thing, yeah.
And then for part 3, politics and culture, analyze interpersonal group dynamics and how this impacts the organization structure and leadership. I think we kind of talked about that initially, right? Which it's definitely, the culture is not, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's, not everybody's getting along, and it kind of leads up to poor leadership and no structure at all.
There definitely needs to be structure put in place, but so much of what the business manager is doing, like going behind the backs, essentially, I think talking smack to the board of directors,
Mhm.
things like that. I'm all for getting rid of this particular business manager and kind of starting fresh with that.
Right? Find somebody that knows how to do the billing and actually knows, give them expectations.
Mhm.
Not just, so obviously we know interprofessional group dynamics, it's just not working. The communication's there, but it's not the proper communication to run a business. It's more of other things that's not really helping the business get better.
Mhm.
With this part of the assignment, I kind of felt like those 4 frames were helpful, because, you know, all the leaders have like their certain strengths, and maybe the business manager and the physician aren't super strong on, I forgot what it was, but human resources, you know, so I guess just making sure that somebody could help bring in some of those, you know, aspects to the team.
I know that in the beginning, Dr. Brown was only able to dedicate like a
16
small
hours.
amount of time towards the clinic, but I don't know what she's doing now. But if she wants to stay in charge or be the director, I think she needs to maybe focus a little bit more on this clinic, and it can't really be a side gig for her.
Right.
Yeah. Somebody needs to be there. I mean, 24/7, or if she's not going to run it, to have somebody else run it for her. 'Cause,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think that's how all this details were missed, probably billing not getting done, you know, obviously business manager telling people what to do and not do. So on the other question, discuss how current healthcare culture and trends demand a high reliable healthcare delivery system. I think everybody now with the internet, right, they can look at how many stars or what kind of service you provide, the quality metrics that there is.
Mhm.
So people look at that already. So if you have a clinic that it doesn't have good quality, I guess, reports, or that those stars that people put in there, right? Because everybody goes in there, they get mad and write a bad review on wherever they go. I
Oh,
think
and of course, angry or unhappy people are much more likely to fill those out after the fact.
Right.
that's true. That's true. So, and as we all know, with, you know, the research and all the reading, is like NPs provide quality care. You know, there's probably, I think I was reading an article where there's really patients, they're not like unhappy with an NP, or they, a lot of times they see the NP without knowing, you know, they say their primary care provider is Dr. Jones, but in all reality, the NP sees them. So that's who they build a relationship with. But definitely providing quality care is a must if you want to maintain your clinic open.
Mhm.
You're not going to recommend anybody or your friend to say, oh, go to that clinic, because that's not going to happen. And then the last one, as a doctorally prepared APRN, you will be poised to address issues with a complex healthcare system. How does your education and the DNP essentials prepare you to demonstrate competency?
Well, I think classes like this, I mean, how we're sitting here talking about all the different aspects of running a clinic, not just treating patients, I think this is helping us for the future be able to actually address these things in real life.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times, even for myself, when I enrolled in this program, I thought, well, I'm going to do patient care, you know, and that was like, I never really thought about the full picture of like, oh, I need to know how businesses run, or it's just a complete different aspect, I guess, because you have to know, you have to be a leader in many ways, not just one, and not just provide care, but how are you going to lead and make sure that the proper care is being provided with your team, or collaboration is definitely something that we must learn. And I think that's why we're here. See, collaborating, trying to get it together.
I think systems based, like getting a picture of like what the system is, and having that background and having that knowledge of like, it's not just what our role is, it's the bigger picture, and seeing how it all works together, and how, you know, the macro and the meso and the micro all work together, and like billing and everything like that too.
Yeah, when we're bedside nurses, I think we're so like just task oriented, right? We're going to get this patient, we're going to make sure their follow equipment is on and all that stuff, but you don't think, what is the manager in the background doing? You know, what are they meeting about? What changes are they going to make it better? You know, how they're tracking and trending the falls, the wounds, and all this other stuff. Like, you really don't even think about stuff like, do all this paper, all these assessments, but you really don't know what they're using them for. So it's pretty interesting. It's awesome, I think, too. So this is a great learning experience. I've learned a lot for sure. So when would you like to meet next, or what would the plan? Do you guys want to just kind of do?
Well, I know that we're not supposed to necessarily divide and conquer this assignment, but I think that since we, as a group, kind of did talk a little bit about each one of these sections, maybe we can split it up to the point that we're focusing more heavily on a specific section. So when we come back, it would be a lot easier to kind of put our paper together and like edit it as a group.
I agree.
Do that. Do you guys want to like just divide the sections and kind of write something up and send it to each other, and then meet and discuss?
Do you maybe want to get a Google Doc going so we can like throw it all in there together, and we could do our outline, just how it, I mean, it's structured right here, maybe like the intro and then the part 1, part 2, part 3, and just kind of outline it like that.
Yeah, we can do that. But I think they just want us to kind of get back and talk about it and make sure we know what we're talking about.
Right.
I think this was kind of like the starting point. I think we all have kind of like a idea of what we need to focus on and stuff, but just to have that, obviously, or the information that it's right, like whether Medicaid pays 100%, or, you know, how is the, you know, how does that in Nevada, other than on the state that they're not talking about here. However you guys want to do it, I'm okay with. And I mean, this time works fine for me. Tuesdays, I could always just make arrangements. If it works for everybody, then we can, but we just have to set a timeline though. We have to say, is it going to be next week, Tuesday, or the following week? How busy are you guys with other classes? Others and I know.
Just to clarify, you guys, before our next meeting, are we splitting up part 1, 2, and 3? And then when we come back together, we're gonna like highlight our special areas?
We can do that if you guys want. I think it's easier than having everything for one person to do.
Yeah, definitely. So there's 3 areas, there's 5 of us, so that doesn't necessarily exactly break up equally.
I was kind of thinking,
If we do it by, you know how part 1 has like 2 small sections, part 2 has 2 sections. So each part has like 2 sections, right?
Yeah.
So we can either divide it on like, you know, 2 people do part 1, and one does, you know, like first, the other one does a second section. And then another one can just take a full one. However you guys, I mean, if you guys want, I can take part 1, I'll do both of the sections, and then you guys can divide the 2. One can take the first section. I think that makes it 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys feel like doing that?
We can do that. Do you feel like you can take on the whole part one? It's not too much. There's a kind of a lot of, there's 2 sections in it, but there's like a lot of questions.
Yeah, I can work on that. It's okay.
Okay.
I can work on the second part of question 2, the like independent practice and APRN versus physician reimbursement. And then I did like answer just based off of before this discussion, like all of the questions. So if it's helpful to you guys, I can also like send that to you guys just to see what I kind of first came up with. And then I'll focus more on trying to do more like intervention specific to the case, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be fine. If
Okay.
you share that, so like that, if you already got some information, we don't have to go and look at the same thing. But I think that next meeting we would have a better idea of how we're going to structure our paper.
Okay.
And like a good writer. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's not me. But just I think after next meeting, if we know, we obviously kind of talk more in detail for each section. And we can write about it, we can share it, and then we can talk about it and then just kind of putting it together so it flows.
So just a quick question, like when we're doing these individual questions, we're going to bring it back to the group and we can deliberate upon like, okay, so this is what I found. What do we think about adding this? And then making that our consensus for that portion, correct?
Yeah, we'll still go over it all like as a group and
Okay.
and make sure that we agree on everything.
Okay, just making sure, because I know that she wants it to be like full consensus type stuff.
Yeah. I'll work on, I guess, part 3.
Okay. I can do the reimbursement, insurance contracts, payer mix stuff, the fee for service model versus value based.
Okay.
I'll take whatever's left then. Is that another one in the politics and culture?
Yeah, how would you like to split up? There's kind of like 3 little sections of that.
Pick one, I'll take 2. Because I think you'll be super helpful at the final product just with your information and your knowledge. Yeah, however you guys, gosh, I almost felt like part 3 could have one person because it's kind of like the fuzzy stuff, but I mean,
That's true. Would you rather jump in and help with part 1 since that's the more like meat and bones of it, and I'll do the whole 3rd part?
Okay, so Susan, you want to take the second portion or the first portion? Doesn't matter.
You pick whatever you like.
So I'll take the first portion, you
Okay.
can take the second one, and then we'll meet again. So when would you guys like to meet? Next Tuesday or the following Tuesday?
I think the following Tuesday would
Work better?
work better.
Yeah, I'm good with the 26th.
The 26th, okay.
I think we have until November, I want to say like November 18th to have all of our Zoom meetings turned in.
I know, we just don't want to leave it till the last minute because everything finals and everything kind of comes during the end of the semester and it gets crazier. So if we can do it, the sooner we can do it, I think the better it would be for all of us. But I know that, like I said, everybody's schedule is so different. So we can do whatever. If we need more time, at least we already kind of started everything and we have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So October 26th. And then do you mind, Lauren, setting up the Zoom again for that?
I don't mind. I'm gonna update it like right after we get off of this Zoom meeting so it can transcribe.
Okay, that's cool. All right. Do you guys think we have enough and we have a plan in place? Hopefully. I think we do.
I mean, it sounds like we do.
All right. So I'll see you guys all on the 26th. And then obviously we can always just kind of email each other if we have questions on anything.
6 p.m. again?
6 is good for me.
Sounds good.
Okay, that works then, 6 p.m. Awesome.
Right.
No,
Bye.
thank you so much. Have a great evening.